mules for substances. And if we go back to the Franklin case and we listen to the people who are still, there were only 3 people that spoke necessarily, right, that we know of the victims. They too spoke about transporting substance from one state to the other on behalf of the people who ran that thing. And when I was really heavily involved with speaking with a lot of Jeff's victims, they too, a few of them said the same thing. But of course, we never really read about that in mainstream. So she was given a conditional sentence of 15 years and was free pending an appeal. However, it was all over the media. She refused to take the stand to defend herself, allegedly because she didn't want to implicate like Hugh Hefner. However, the prosecution wasn't going to let it drop. And at the same time that this was happening, there was another Playboy that had been unalived and had been subpoenaed. Now, her attorneys, meaning Bobby Arnstein, said to her, hey, we have it on 2 reliable sources that there is a contract out on your life, meaning from Hef. Now, whether she believed her attorney or not, I don't know. But she checked into a hotel with an assumed name, and she was found dead, even though she told a friend the day before, I'll see you tomorrow. So she actually called a friend. The husband picked up. She said, you know what, just tell her I'll see her tomorrow. And she was found unalived. So people, of course, suspect that our friend Hef was responsible. I frankly suspect he was responsible as well, because after this ended, he moved to Los Angeles permanently, because it was supposed to be like just an obscure house that he wasn't going to spend a lot of time in. But this Playboy mansion located near Beverly Hills was purchased in 1971. It sits on approximately 22,000 square feet of land. It has more than 20 rooms. Again, audio-visual. Includes an oversized swimming pool and a man-made grotto. Now, at the time, he paid $1.1 million. Now, he did something that's very unusual. He sold it in 2016 for 100 times that, like for 100 million. And he got, with the option to live there with all of his friends and animals and parties rent-free until the end of his life. And so, so he really got more than 100 times what he initially paid for it.
Who bought it?
Well, I don't, I didn't care. I've had this for I think a decade, this information. So I forget who bought it from him, but it's considered, there are some pieces of property that are considered important. You don't knock it down like the Rickless family knocked down Pickfair. It's a landmark. And so whoever purchased it knew that it would only continue to hold the value because of who lived there before. Now, that said, I do know it was completely renovated because it was in really horrible shape. So Brooke Shields, some people may recall, posed in the Buff at the age of 10 for Sugar and Spice, which is a Playboy-owned magazine. She was heavily made up. She was only 10. Now, she and I have a mutual friend, and he told me years and years ago that her mother, who is now deceased, had a horrible drinking problem. And I believed him, and I still believe him, because he would tell me all these horrible stories about what was happening to Brooke, and I thought, wow. However, I discovered that her father was very well off. He came from an Italian princess, so she's got royalty also in her DNA. And even though he left her mother when she was only 6 months old, he remained in her life and he took care of her financially. So that why her mother would have needed the $400 or so she got for this nude spread of Brooke, which is really just child PORN, I don't understand. Now, another girl who posed for Playboy and who also worked for Polanski is a woman by the name of Eva Ionesco. I'm going to spell that for you guys. Ionesco. Now, she was born on July 18, 1965, and her mother claims that she was the product of her own father R-wording her, producing. Yes. There's a lot of this in these families. There's a lot of this. And she was a really bad mother. She was a photographer, and she began taking really very, I'm going to say, risque photos of her when she was 4 years old. So commencing in 1969, although she didn't display them until 1974, but what does that matter, right? I mean, these photos are of your child, and you're taking very risque photos. And they were very controversial. They were controversial. And then, of course, her mother allowed her to be in Playboy Spain, nude, like Brooke Shields at the age of 11. And Roman Polanski, who's got no problem with little girls, he has her in his 1976 film, The Tenant. Now, there's a really weird quote by Polanski, and I'm going to read it, but I'm going to read it delicately. If I had killed somebody, it wouldn't have had so much appeal to the press, you see. But you see, and the girls, judges want to F young girls. Juries want to F young girls. Everyone wants to F young girls. Exclamation point. And he said this in an interview that is still online. Now, really? Okay, let's remember our friend Jeff, who had a photo of 5-year-old Selena Dubin on the walls of his Palm Beach mansion. Selena Dubin is the daughter of his supposed to have been girlfriend of 8 or 9 years, Eva Anderson, who married Glenn Dubin, who, by the way, was a taxi driver. So was Jeff during the time that he was taking a summer vacation. However, Glenn Dubin's father worked for my abuser's father, Meshulam Riklis. They were both in the garment industry. And Glenn Dubin's father made knockoffs for Meshulam Riklis that he sold. So today, Glenn Dubin owns Jackie Onassis's Park Avenue apartment in New York City. So I guess all you need to become a billionaire is to drive a taxi. And then you become a billionaire because there's so many people I just drive a taxi, and then suddenly you're a billionaire. However, Jeff had a photo of 5-year-old Selena Dubin in his Palm Beach mansion. Now, the person that brought that to light was Virginia Giuffre, who gave it to the FBI in 2010 when she was first contacted by them. And we only know that through the wonderful information that Virginia supplied. That said, I want people to remember that every victim who steps forward only speaks about what they saw during the time that they were in that position. In Virginia's case, it was about 18 months. Different people have different people that they interacted with or different things that they saw. And so we have to remember that the story is not narrow, that it's really very broad. So Hefner interviewed Sharon and her husband, Roman Polanski. They were on his TV show, Playboy After Dark. Now, it was, I believe it was like filmed on July 24th, 1968. However, it wasn't released until February of 69. So that would have been a few months before the tragic incident where the Manson family goes berserk. So, however, when he was talking to them, the topic was violence. And when in hindsight, when you think about it, I mean, frankly, Polanski only did violent films. I mean, even something that on the surface appears not to have violence, which is Rosemary's Baby, it's violent to our senses, right? It's like it seeps in. I can't watch that movie. It's too dark. And then they talked about the S word in films. And Sharon said that she had been arrested in Italy for indecent exposure, which immediately reminded me of Kanye and his wife. And then Roman Polanski reminded her, "Oh, you were almost arrested in LA for wearing a bikini." However, an odd thing. Now, these guys are very close. In fact, when they got married in the London Playboy mansion that we will be talking about shortly, that's where their reception was held. That is how close Roman Polanski was to the Playboy people. Hefner, however, was obsessed with Charles Manson. So would anybody be obsessed with the person who has unalived your friend? Like Shaun, at least you can answer that one.
Strange, isn't it?
Odd. I mean, if somebody unalived my friend, I would want to destroy them. But he was obsessed with him. So again, like a former playmate by the name of Sandra Theodore gave several interviews, and she was with him during 1976 to 1981, and she shared Hefner's fascination and obsession with Manson, and that his ability to surround himself and earn loyalty from the women. Now, they weren't women, they were teenage girls. And she says that he couldn't talk enough about him, and that even though these women have been in jail, when they get out, they're still going to adore him. And Hef wanted that for himself. And now, mind you, again, these were girls. And he had films of the girls carrying rifles, like, again, very violent and dark things. And, I mean, it's just really very peculiar. And Manson clearly is connected to the Process Church. It is believed that Manson took the fall. And it is also believed David Berkowitz, son of Sam, took the fall for members that were higher up. And that's a deep well, but I'm not the first person to say that these people took the fall. Maury Terry, who wrote, I think, one of the better books on David Berkowitz and the son of Sam, who is no longer with us, sadly. He devoted his life to studying this case, believed that there was a network of elites involved with very strange things, and also with, let's say, the Aleister Crowley kind of things, and other secret Masonic type groups. And so another tell that Hefner was involved with CIA was his connection to Castle Bank, which was really a CIA cutout. Castle Bank was created by Paul Helliwell, who was an OSS official and a co-founder of CIA. And Castle Bank was created by CIA to funnel money into covert programs. Now, when he was under, every now and then these guys just have either their companies or something. They were conducting some kind of like investigation into his taxes, they discovered, oh, okay, well, here we have Hefner connected to Castle Bank. However, nothing came of that. Other people, interestingly enough, were Tony Curtis, and this family is going to be interesting, the Pritzker family. Now, they own the Hyatt hotel chain, and Hyatt Hotel's billionaire Thomas Pritzker, who was a cousin of then Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, is among the names of more than 100 people connected to Jeff in the documents made public in January, I believe, of 2024. And Virginia also named Thomas Pritzker as being one of the men she had to make happy. So that should have been a clue for people that, oh, okay, he's connected to that bank, therefore he must be a CIA front as well. Now, this guy, Paul Halliwell, has a very interesting connection to Disney. And we've all heard many things about Disney. He played a very key role in purchasing the site for Disney. And that was like really two different towns, and helping to create this. So that makes one wonder, are all the MK Ultra stories we heard about Disney true? Is all that stuff true? Because why would the CIA be involved in creating Disney in Florida? Okay, we're about to cross the Atlantic. You ready?
Yep.
We're going to go into London. So in 1966, July, Hefner's right-hand man, Victor Lowndes, who had been working with Hef for a while, opens the Playboy in the UK. It becomes a place for many people to hang out, including the Beatles, Judy Garland, Sean Connery, and Roman Polanski could not get enough. He was just be there all the time. Warren Beatty, who had access to the LA club, hey, when he was on the other side, he would go there. Frank Sinatra would hang out there. Opening night was Satanist Sammy Davis, because he became a Satanist under Anton LaVey. And I don't know if you guys know. Does anybody in the audience know that Sammy Davis at one time painted his pinky nail red and actually was a Satanist? Is anybody saying that? Because I'm looking at my notes.
It takes a minute or two before they start putting the answers in. Yeah, some people are saying yes, they are all Satanists. Some people are saying no. So mixed. Did not know. Most people did not know.
All right, so that was the opening act for the club, which opened in Mayfair. Now, Anthony Tenzer is a new name for, I think, most people. Anthony Tenzer is the person that really helped Polanski make his first two films. However, he had an unusual reputation before these two films for Polanski. He used to make the kind of film we talked about at the beginning, where people are doing something unusual, which includes BDSM and unusual activities. And so the way he used to distribute his photos and his films was to private people who paid him. They could not be shown anywhere because they were full of violence. They were full of ritualistic things. They were full of, just horrific stuff. However, he goes ahead, and clearly Polanski has no problem with this, because Anthony Tenzer produces his first two films, his first two English-speaking films. Now, Anthony Tenzer is a very interesting person because his attorney is none other than David Jacobs. Now, does that ring a bell for anyone in the audience?
Not yet.
I'm going to wait.
We've got a nice picture of Sammy and Aquino.
Oh,
Anton
good.
LaVey. Right, Anton
Yeah.
LaVey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, in the movie Rosemary's Baby, it is Anton LaVey who plays the role of the person who R-words Mia Farrow when she's having that nightmare and impregnates her with the devil's son. And it was denied until he passed away, and then only in his obituary was it finally revealed. So anyway, nobody knows who, which is great because you guys have to be open to new names. So David Jacobs is the attorney for the Beatles. And he is also the attorney for Anthony Tenzer. People who frequented gay parties, private parties, were usually people that had an inclination for young, let's say minor, let's call them not mature boys. Another person whose name I want to mention is DJ Alan Freeman, who was also a client of David Jacobs. Are you okay, Shaun?
Yeah, I'm muted. I'm just changing
okay.
the
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And Jacobs was also friends with Robert Maxwell. So we have come full circle with, we're beginning to see the same people in Roman Polanski's world. Now, there was an article that exposed one of these men, Alan Freeman, who again was a DJ alongside Jimmy Savile. He was 11 years old. And when he was, let's say, assaulted. Now, he gave the interview to The Mirror. He gave an interview to another newspaper. And this happened in 1964 when he was 11. Now, he didn't know who the person was, but the person was actually Victor Beaumont, who was a German actor. And he told this, I'm trying to remember when if I have the date. I don't have the date of when this article was printed. However, he had been he had to have therapy for a very long time after what happened to him when he was 11, because he said that this man who had an accent told him that he would take him home, just get in the car, and he was waiting to catch the bus. And he thought, okay, well, he told the paper that this man had a strange accent, and that the man said that he would get along with his son. And instead of taking him home, however, they went to an apartment. He forced his hand to the back of this boy's head, and that's when he saw two other men entering the room behind him. The first one was wearing a dark suit and a tie, and that was Alan Freeman, who works with Jimmy Savile, DJ, who was also accused of a lot of things. And the second one was wearing a tracksuit, and that was Jimmy Savile. And so at 11, he was no match for the three men as they launched their brutal assault. And he goes on to say, Beaumont forced my head down into the bed, and I remember the gold crisscross pattern on the sheet. I tried to struggle and then to curl up, but Beaumont had his knee on my back, pinning me down. And then somehow his left arm was cut, and he saw a lot of blood, and then he passed out. When he finally came to, he heard them outside the door. The door was closed, and he's like thinking, oh my God, what are they going to do with me? And so he sneaked into the utility room. He grabbed his clothes. He climbed out of the window, and then he fell into bushes and started running. And then he later recognized Freeman from a picture on the cover of the Radio Times. Now, this man Freeman later in an interview in 1994 said that he had been bisexual, but he became celibate in 1981. Now, these parties that were made by Alan whose nickname was Fluff Freeman, for his pal Jimmy Savile and others like David Jacobs, frankly, and like Brian Epstein, who was the Beatles' manager, were given assistance by the Kray twins. Now, I'm going to let you, because I think you know a little bit about the Kray twins, describe who they are.
So, if people are familiar with the most iconic gangsters of London, and various movies have been made about the Kray twins. The first one was with the Kemp brothers, and later on there was another. There's a ton of books about them as well. We've actually published a book by Steve Rafe, who was obsessed with the Krays from a very young age. But they were glamorized, and that's why people falsely worshipped them. But behind the scenes, because we've interviewed loads of people who were in prison and came across them in prison. And for example, we just filmed John Hilton Part 2. John Hilton served 45 years in every UK prison he's been in the whole country. And we asked him about the Krays, and he was like, they are PDF files. He saw them, manipulating young people coming in who idolized them and taking advantage of that situation. So they were considered a formidable force on the street because they had so many people who would put in work for them. Even from prison, people would just do anything that they ordered. But when the mafia came out to form an alliance with them, one of them supposedly asked for like a down payment of like £10,000. And the mafia guy just went back to the crime families of America and said, these guys are nickel and dime. We can't do business with them. They're small time. So they killed a few people that we know of, Jack the Hat included. One of the brothers was completely psychotic, on and off meds. He ended up in Broadmoor under Savile's watch. And but put one in the chat if you've watched the film, any of the films about the Krays, and put a 2 in the chat if you're not familiar with them. But most people here in the UK are familiar with them because they were like the iconic gangsters of that era. But it was hidden. All the PDF file stuff was hidden until more recently.
Yeah, so the Kray twins, especially Reggie, who was the one who was into young boys, would supply these people who are Polanski's people. So now we have a direct link, Polanski, Hefner, because we've seen Hef now with young girls. Brooke Shields, one of them, and we see where this is going. And these parties, that's the Krays would make sure that these parties, they would grab a boy. If the boy did not do as was told, there was a very famous case where one boy refused to do something for Lord Boothby. I don't know if you remember Lord Boothby, but
yeah, they integrated themselves into political blackmail, and Boothby was part of that.
Yes, and one boy was. I found some like records that I don't believe were made public, which are, I've put stuff on my Substack. I think a lot of people that are here, I'm not sure, are members of my Substack. However, I did find records to substantiate that there was, and I don't have that in front of me because I wasn't going to talk about it, but a boy who did not comply was the suitcase murder. That's what it was referred to. They found his severed head in one suitcase. They found his body parts. Everything was cut into 8 pieces. And that was done because he did not comply. At the same time that the Krays selected that one boy who was 17, they selected another boy. Now that boy complied. And according to what I was able to find, which is not, I don't think it's public, he became a very well-known singer. So the people who comply, as we have been seeing in the case against Combs, get to go far, at least as far as if they stay alive, right? There was a very odd thing that David Jacobs was also connected to that was, again, made on behalf, it is believed, for Anthony Tenzer, who again financed the first two English-speaking films for Roman Polanski. And that was the crucifixion. And I'm not sure if anybody here even knew. Do you know about the crucifixion in London?
No.
Okay, so in Hampton Heath, 4 men are there. One of them is being nailed to the cross. He's not bleeding. The other one is taking pictures. So, like, somebody calls the police, and the police show up. They arrest these people. David Jacobs somehow becomes involved. And of course, he's involved because he is the attorney for this guy, Tony Tenzer, right? Connected to Roman Polanski, connected to Jimmy Savile, connected to everyone. And he defends them. He is frankly part of the Velvet Mafia, right? He's already helped Liberace. He helps anyone who has a problem. However, he has become very paranoid around this period in his life. He tells the court, and now there's not a lot that can be found on David Jacobs. So he's like a ghost. And I suspect he too is a Jeff person. He is part of the intel apparatus. He believes that his phones are bugged. He is committed to a psychiatric institution for a little while. Now, he's a tall 6'3" guy. He's very powerful. He's the attorney for very powerful movie stars and singers and the Rolling Stones as well, not just the Beatles. And but he's gay at a time that it's not legal to be gay. And he's also, along with Brian Epstein, allegedly, into these parties with Savile and the others with young boys. Now, this trial took on like a circus-like thing because there's talk of black magic rituals. And so, of course, no one's going to understand all of this black magic, all of this stuff about BDSM. However, we, in 2025, we're aware that this is part and parcel of the groups and of these people's lives. Well, I want to just, before I go into how David Jacobs and Brian Epstein met their end, I want to explain how the Maxwell twin sisters might have played a role in protecting Savile. And so what happened, and then I want to go back to Roy Cohn for a minute. So in April of 2022, Netflix released a 2-part documentary, Jimmy Savile, A British Horror Story. And I'm sure everyone has seen it because I know I watched it twice.
My father was in it.
He was?
He was in one of them. Was it the Netflix one? Yeah, I think it was the Netflix one, yes.
In what role?
With Coogan. So he was playing a background character. He was on the pier when Coogan was playing Savile. Do you know the ice cream parlor guy? The big guy?
Vaguely.
Yeah, he I can't remember his name. Jack something. Anyway, they put their arm around the little kid and they walk off. My dad said he was watching this scene and it just made him feel sick, even though they were actors playing the parts. Jack and Ellie.
Wow.
Yeah, because they were running like an ice cream parlor, but he was the head of a PDF ring and he was involved in local politics. This guy, yeah. He was
wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
So it was in this film that I took a screenshot because initially the journalists who were trying to find information on institutions connected to Savile got zero results. And I noticed that it wasn't said, I just saw it flicker. And I'm like, what? Magellan. They were using the Magellan Internet Guide. Now, Robert Maxwell's twin sisters in 1993, Isabel and Christine, co-founded Magellan, one of the early search engines. The company was then sold to Excite, another search engine, in 1996. Now, at that point, results began to pop up. This was not discussed in this documentary. I took this screen image and I wrote about it on my Substack because that's what I do. I spot things. And I'm like, were they, in fact, helping? Why wouldn't they? Robert Maxwell is friends with David Jacobs also, right? David Jacobs is friends and having ORGIES with Jimmy Savile. So why would not the Maxwell sisters use their Magellan Internet Guide to obscure anything from coming up? I should have sent you a screen image. Yeah, I mean it's horrible. So we do remember, and I think you interviewed this guy, and correct me if I am wrong. Richard Kerr, does that ring a bell?
How do you spell the last name?
Kerr. Richard. He was an abuse victim of.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Do you remember him? Because I think you interviewed him.
Yeah, there's a very powerful documentary about him that made me cry, and then I had the honor of speaking to him after that. Yeah.
So we know from Richard, who I actually saw when you did the show, that he's scarred clearly, but he also mentioned that Roy Cohn took him to Venice to SA him. Now, of course, Cohn was Donald Trump's mentor. Cohn is a known PDF file. And in a weird thing, Hefner has only ever had one man on the cover of his magazine, and that man is Donald Trump. Isn't that peculiar? And Donald Trump, remember when I talked earlier about the photograph showing the 5 men speaking, Roy Cohn was at that event with his legal partner. And the reason I know is because it made the news and it was written in a news article. And we know that, Cohn was a horrible person. And let me just
let me add a little something here into the viewers.
Yeah.
Some of them might find this fantastical. So basically, Richard Kerr, he's a survivor of Kincora Boys' Home, and he said that people were unalived in that home, and he's tried to get justice for decades and to speak out, and he's doing it not for financial reasons. He's doing it to honor the kids who died in there. And he's also said that the reason it was put under wraps and it's suppressed to this day is because of the peace deal that was being brokered and the political blackmail that was going on behind the scenes between England and Ireland. And so much was at stake, they just decided to sacrifice these kids, and it's been suppressed to this day. So it's all verified. I've seen all his paperwork, and it's an ongoing case that he's got.
Yeah, I mean, I give him a lot of credit for fighting these people, but it is a very large ring, and it all seems to be connected. And it all seems to be connected to the royal family. It's connected to the intelligence agencies of various countries, which is why it takes so much, even what happened in Australia, it just takes a lot of pushing. Now, we are aware that in the Jeff case, we had CIA assets posing as attorneys. and I'm going to use air quotes, helping the victims. We had, multi-million-dollar settlements. These are called shut up payments. $5 million to you, $5 million to you. Who pays? The Catholic Church pays $20,000. And it takes years for the victims of the Catholic Church to get their $20,000. And so when you see, like Shaun Combs, he gave her what, $30 million? That's when you're guilty. Prince Andrew gave Virginia 12. Was it 12 million or the equivalent of UK dollars? What amount was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think you're about right though, about 12 million.
And so, you make these settlements to silence some